Good morning and welcome to this online overview and scrutiny management meeting. This is the first scrutiny meeting held under the new arrangements. So I would ask for both members of council and members of the public to be patient with us as we try and come to terms with this. And I'll try and outline how we believe this is going to work. So to clarify, members are connected through Zoom. The council scrutiny team are hosting the meeting and the rest of us are joining as invitees. The meeting is also being webcast on YouTube so that members of the public can be watching this meeting. If members want to speak on an issue, please will you either raise a hand physically on screen or virtually on screen using the appropriate button so that I can see that you want to speak. As in a normal meeting, I will try and update the list of speakers so that you know you've been called. When you have asked your question, can you lower your hand if you've done it virtually, or Democratic Services will do that for you. It's more important than ever that only the person called speaks, otherwise this will not be an easy process. I have asked Lucy or anyone else from the Democratic Services team that they interrupt at any time if there is anything that needs to be said, either about the process or technical issues relating to the meeting. So that invitation to interrupt exists, and I'm sure all members will agree with that. I am going to forego the normal safety briefing on the grounds that you all know more about the safety in your own homes than I do, so I'm leaving that to you. I apologise there are so many supplementary items to this agenda, but I'm sure we all accept the extraordinary circumstances in which we meet, and it was more important that we started the process than we had all the papers ready at the appropriate time. There are difficult etiquette issues here. I ask members to be aware that they are being watched at all time by both other members and anyone else who's looking in. But I also understand that the attempt to watch the screen and to look at papers and to deal with notes relating to the meeting will mean that you will need to be dealing with other electronic gadgets as well as the screen that you're engaging in this meeting with. Lucy, do you have anything else you wish to add at this stage?
No, Chair. At some point it would be helpful to clarify the arrangements around public forum, so I can do that now or later if you wish. Yep,
we'll do that under the public forum section. Yep. Okay. Now, members, I'm setting an approximate time of 2 hours for this meeting. It's always dangerous to admit that at the start. But I think for a first session of this nature, we don't want to overstay our welcome and we want to get used to the process. That's not to curtail debate and discussion, but it is to give you an indication of where I'm hoping we can get to, and I'll try and allocate time accordingly. So item 2, Lucy, do we have any apologies?
None received, Chair.
Thank you, Lucy. Can I ask members if you have any declarations of interest? No, none. Item 4, minutes. This was a supplementary item distributed yesterday. Can I approve these as a correct record? Members happy that we do so? Yeah. Any to the contrary? No? Okay. Somehow or other, I will sign those at an appropriate time. So then, in terms of Chair's remarks, if I can just go into a little bit of detail here, if you bear with me. The Oz and Leeds have had 2 Zoom meetings in recent weeks, and we're of the view that this meeting was important. We needed to ensure the ability to scrutinise executive decisions existed and was capable of being used. But we also had a responsibility to ensure that we did not distract officers from critical work that they were responsible for. I hope we've got the balance right. We believed it was appropriate to have a report on the COVID-19 response, As members, we are getting daily updates, weekly briefings, and much more. But we wanted an opportunity to summarise the incredible work that officers have been doing, ensure that it formally went into the public domain, and this was the best process for that to happen. This is an opportunity for question and comment. A detailed budget paper is going to Cabinet on Tuesday. Councillor Clark has prepared some notes for members on that basis, and we will cover that briefly, but we will also concentrate on the supplementary paper in our packs. The next item we looked at is the CAS paper, the Clean Air Zone. It's going to Cabinet on Tuesday. That report is so critical, and we felt we had to give it further scrutiny at this stage. Item 9 is the Mayor's Forward Plan. The leads of the scrutiny leads have looked at various items in that plan and will comment on those areas. And I'd link with that scrutiny in the short to medium term. The OSM Leads proposal is that OSM Leads should meet to review each new forward plan, identify issues for further scrutiny. That reports will either be requested direct to OSM or to informal working groups led by the scrutiny chairs on a departmental scrutiny basis. And that we also continue to review the response to COVID-19 and plans for returning to the new normal. We will review in conjunction with senior officers when it is appropriate for individual commissions to start meeting, and recognise that the People and Health Scrutiny Commissions will need to start informal meetings very soon. Lucy, have I covered all the things that we've discussed?
Yes, you have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So item 6 on the agenda is public forum. There is difficulty in dealing with public forum in this format. Members should have had sight of statements and questions and the available answers. Lucy, can you just take us through this, please?
Yes, just for the purposes of everybody watching, I wanted to clarify that we do have some new procedure rules in place at the moment to deal with virtual meetings, known as the virtual procedure rules, which are available on our website. And within those, you'll see that we are committing to receiving public forum in the usual way, and this will always be circulated to the committee members before each meeting. But what we're not doing at the moment is enabling the public to actually participate in the meetings themselves. So we are going to be keeping this under review, and we hope to be reviewing our arrangements and seeing whether we can add a bit more flexibility around that going forward. But for the meeting today, the committee have all had the public forum, but the public won't be joining us at this session.
Thank you, Lucy. Are members happy with that position as it now stands, and the fact that we will try and remedy that as soon as the council annual meeting has approved the process? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So we move on to item 17. Item 7, which is COVID-19 report. And Mike, if I can hand over to you, please, for introduction.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make some brief opening remarks before handing over to Tim Borrett, and primarily, Chair, just really to say thank you to all of the staff from right across the council who have responded so magnificently to the challenge of dealing with COVID and all of its many issues and challenges for the residents of Bristol. That's not just staff dealing with frontline services and most directly with the issues raised, but also all of the staff in the support services who literally have moved mountains to make sure that those frontline staff can continue to do their job. And I should say also those staff who have kept some of the business as usual activity going on, particularly some of the priority initiatives around growth and regeneration, because we need to keep the momentum going on those things ready for the recovery phase, which we need to start moving into. The city will need those just as much as they need the current response to the crisis. I'd also just like to acknowledge what an amazing response we've had from the city at large. residents and partner organisations, and I know many members have been closely involved with that response within their own communities. Tim's going to run through the report, but I did want to highlight in particular the financial implications. And we really need to make sure that the government understands the impact on our income streams. I think the government does understand the additional costs associated with responding to the crisis, but I really don't think they've yet grasped that for some authorities, the loss of income streams is actually significantly greater than the direct costs associated to responding to the crisis. And you'll see in both the Cabinet report and in the report that you've got today that the loss of income to the council is probably in excess of £80 million. And if we don't get significant government support in helping meet that gap, there are going to be undoubtedly significant impacts on our ability to deliver frontline services. So at that point, Chair, I'll hand over to Tim Borrett.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everybody. I don't intend to run through the full report. You'll see it's a fairly lengthy and detailed report. We did receive some brief from Osm Leeds as to some particular areas that you were keen to focus on today. So I would just highlight that those 5 areas are picked up in the reports from section 7. So particular detail today on domestic abuse, on homelessness, foster care, care homes and adult social care. And I would note we have our Director of Adult Social Care with us at this meeting, and also the Can Do Bristol platform and volunteering. So there's some detail in there along with an overview of the response to date. From my perspective, what I would highlight from that is obviously we've been working at a very high pace, as Michael leads to, within a very complex structure. You'll see in the report that I've tried to set out some of the reporting structures regionally and nationally that are part of the major incident response. Obviously, that's been happening at pace across all partners, and some very quick decision making required. One thing I did want to flag up is in terms of our legislative compliance. We have been making sure that we are fully compliant in terms of the Coronavirus Act. Also where there have been fast decisions around issues such as change of use, for example, for the temporary place of rest at Sandy Park. We have ensured that we have appropriate powers to have taken those decisions at the pace that we did. That is probably enough by way of the introduction to the report. What I would just say in terms of your debates about moving forward is we're very much at a stage now where we need to start thinking about a managed transition towards recovery. We're looking at how that is managed in terms of the governance and the balance between a continuing response, but the need to transition towards the medium and long-term recovery in the city. So that's becoming an increasing focus for officers, and very keen for any members' views on any role Scrutiny would wish to play within that.
Right, thank you, Tim. Members who would like to start? And at the moment, I can't see you all, so I'm going to need you to use virtual hand raising to...
Chair, would you like me to stop sharing the report on screen so that you've got better sight of members?
Yeah. That might be helpful, because we should, in theory, all have access to the report on Modern Go anyway. That's better. Right, I have got Joe and then Anthony at the moment. So Joe, you're muted, Joe. Oh, that's better. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good. I was just going to say, I think the extra mile stuff that you're doing is really good, and it's great that people who are able to step up during the crisis are, you know, kind of recognised and rewarded. But I'm just slightly nervous that the people who can't step up because they've got health problems, or they've got caring responsibilities, don't sort of lose out when we kind of get back to normal. That was one of my comments. And then regarding the sort of provision around the domestic violence, are we aware of any service reductions, sort of, you know, kind of efficiencies that had to be made because we had less income that are impacting on the service we're able to provide during lockdown? There's some stuff around the van dwellers as well, and the sites there. I've had people contact me because they're worried that those sites are going to get taken over by travellers, and I'm pretty reassured that this isn't going to happen, but I'd like to know what's happening regarding designated traveller sites and what we're doing to support the traveller community. Has anybody had conversations with the traveller community? Some slight concerns about what might be happening with regard to PPE in sort of care for carers, in sort of in care homes and those visiting people in their own homes, and what sort of training is being provided. I noticed you mentioned something around health scrutiny. I'd like to find out what arrangements are being made for us to scrutinise the CCG with regard to training. And
can I just hold you there, because my head's whirling with all those questions, and I think we've got to give officers a chance
sure,
to respond to those first.
I've got more, but I can come back later.
Yeah, Tim, can you start the response?
I can begin, Chair. I may, while we're at this, try and instant message a couple of relevant colleagues as well and see if I can get a bit more detail on questions as we go. Because obviously, a bit like when I'm with you for performance reports, I have an overview, but I won't have all of the in-depth service detail. So my understanding around domestic violence is that there isn't any reduction in service provision, but I would just want to check the chapter and verse of that and come back to you, Councillor Sargent, with a written response. But certainly I'm not aware of any reduction there. In terms of your question about the extra mile, it's probably wise for me to invite Mike Jackson, as Head of Paid Service, to come in around the staffing issues there.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I'll just broaden out Tim's response on the DV challenge. So just to clarify, the loss of income relates to our forecast for the whole of the current financial year. There are no reductions in services as a result of loss of income at the moment, and as Tim says, so there's no direct correlation between concerns about income. On the staffing issue, yeah, just to reassure you, Joe, we're very well aware that people have you know, different ability to respond in the current environment, and would not at all look to penalise anyone who quite rightly had to prioritise either their health or their other responsibilities. So very happy to reassure you on that.
Sorry, can I just come back and say I didn't mean loss of income. I know what you were just talking about in terms of the money that we're losing as a result of the services, the impact COVID-19 is having on our service provision. But it's actually, I was talking about the fact that, you know, we have had to make efficiency savings in the past on various services due to budget cuts. And I just wanted to know whether, you know, had we not had to make those cuts in the past, what sort of service we would have been able to have provided with regard to domestic violence. That was what I was asking. It wasn't about the cuts we're anticipating, the reduction in income we're anticipating going to have. It was what we've already lost.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say on that, I think members will have their own views about the extent to which the overall reductions to public finances over the last few years have resulted in a reduction in service provision. It's very difficult to know for certain, and I know members have got a range of views about that. I don't think, Chair, it'd be appropriate for me to say any more.
Can I, Joe, just pick up your comment about scrutiny as well? We don't have a clear way forward, but what we agreed at the Leeds meeting, and I'd be grateful for members' confirmation that they're happy with this, is that in terms of Claire as chair of people and Brenda as chair of health and Celia as, I think, vice chair of people, we have three people whose knowledge of care and health is extraordinary. And what we've suggested is that they work up a group that can ask questions. But what we don't want to do is request reports that involve officers taking significant amounts of time to prepare for meetings, and that applies even more to the health service. So we've got to work on how we get that balance right, and I think probably we need to work with you, Mike, as well, and other senior officers to work out how we engage in this process in a constructive way when the time is right. But what we don't want to do is distract from the much more important job in hand. Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I'm having a meeting with Dan Berlin on Monday, and we're going to see what we can do about getting information, but without putting unnecessary burdens on anybody. And Claire and I have already looked at a list of potential issues we want to investigate further.
Thank you, Brenda. Anthony. You're muted again. Oh, that's better.
Right. Hello. I've got 3 quick questions and then a couple of observations, if I may. And the 3 quick questions refer to items in the report. The first question is, who is the Bristol Resilience Officer? I've not seen that person named. The second thing is that on page 8, section D of the report, we refer to easements in the way that we are actually allowed or intend to tackle certain things. I'd like to understand what that means, please. And the third one, as my initial questions, is I'm aware that a lot of staff have been rightly deployed into frontline and particularly difficult areas for working. What I'd be quite interested to know is which areas have had staff very largely taken away. In other words, which services, and there will be background services, but which services are we now seriously underperforming on because of the need to move staff into the right areas? I'll stick at that for the moment, but I'd like to come back. Thank you.
Chair, is it helpful for me to come back? I've been logging and I'm conscious we've now got a little bit of a backlog of questions, some of which I can certainly help with, and some I've got some colleagues who can. So just in terms of ones I can pick up very quickly for you, the Bristol Resilience Director is Patsy Meller, and she is continuing in that role. In terms of the areas redeployed, I'll let Mike say some more, but typically those have been from areas which have had to be closed. So, for example, where we've closed libraries or museums temporarily, that creates a pool of staff who can then be redeployed into other services. So my belief is that that's predominantly from services which are temporarily closed or reduced, as opposed to reducing services which are trying to operate. But I'm sure Mike may have a little bit more to say on that. In terms of a couple of the other questions around the traveller community, they have been engaged with, and since you've asked Councillor Sargent, we've been joined by Paul Sylvester from our housing team. So I might just invite him, Chair, to say a few words on the approach to traveller engagement and the van dweller sites. Yep,
thank you. Paul?
Good morning, everyone. Just a quick update from Tom Gilchrist, who's a colleague of mine who's leading on this piece of work with other people in the council. So the site in the Portway is now full. We've got 25 vehicles there, which are being co-managed with the vehicle dwellers themselves and the City Council. We've got a second site that's either opening later today or on Monday at the Active Sports site at Bamfield and Bristol. And this will provide accommodation for another 25 vehicles with water, toilet and washing facilities will be provided. There was a particular question, was it from Councillor Sargent around, was it Gypsy and Traveller community? Sorry, Joe, did you want to repeat what the question was?
Sorry, Yeah, it was just more to know about what sort of conversations you're having with any representatives. I mean, it isn't because obviously there's a site in Lawrence Weston.
Yeah.
It's quite a small site, and presumably somebody must be talking to representatives of traveller communities, because they have sites that they can come and use.
Yeah.
But with social distancing and any other arrangements, I don't know how they're affected by all of that. So although it's not necessarily directly affected with homelessness, because they probably wouldn't class themselves as homeless, there is still that issue of our responsibilities to provide them with a site, but also to ensure those sites are safe.
Yep, no, for sure. And we have somebody who works in housing and landlord services who's a liaison officer with that community. So if you'd like, I can get an update from them and then provide that to you after the meeting. Okay.
Thank you. So just to pick up, Chair, I've got 2 remaining issues on my list, and I'm sure you'll tell me if there was more I've missed, which were questions around PPE and around easements referred to in the report. PPE certainly does remain one of the highest areas of risk and concern for us in terms of the national supply. We are joined this morning by Hugh Evans, who is the Council's new Director of Adult Social Care. So for answers on those questions on PPE and easements, I'll just hand over to Hugh for a little bit of detail.
Good morning. In regards to PPE, yes, as Tim highlighted, it is an issue that's got a very national profile. Suffice to say, I think in Bristol at this stage, there's a range of mechanisms in place that to present have meant that we haven't had anybody have dire shortage of PPE. Everybody so far in both council provided services and in independent and private sector care and support services has been able to access the PPE that they need. There's been some confusion in the last week and a half around the government guidance in regard to use of PPE, but that's actually been settled now, and I think we anticipate that for the time being, given present supply, that there will be sufficient. If providers in any of the wards do have a shortage of PPE, care homes or domiciliary care providers, there is an email address that they should have, and we'll make sure that councillors have got a copy of that if they receive representations. And they can contact the commissioning people within the adult social care department, and that people do go out at the weekends with car boots full of stuff and distribute it. We have averted any real shortages at this stage because of that. So there are systems in place, and at this stage we're on top of it. In regard to the Care Act easements, that's a slightly more in-depth issue in regard to the ability that the government have created for councils to, in certain circumstances under the COVID process, relax their Care Act duties, primarily in regard to assessing and meeting eligible need, undertaking financial assessments, undertaking reviews, and providing care and support plans for people. Really, this is utter last resort stuff. We don't anticipate at this stage, with the lockdown and the distancing that's going on, the curve for the southwest in general has been flattened and elongated. So we're not seeing huge pressures for hospital places, and we're not seeing huge pressures for care at this stage. So we don't anticipate having to invoke Care Act easements, despite the concern that there is in some of the care sectors. We don't want to invoke Care Act easements. We like the Care Act. It's our raison d'etre. It's the means by which we organise ourselves, and we don't anticipate at this stage any need to do that in the foreseeable future. It's merely a mechanism that can be invoked if crisis situations do occur.
Thank you, Hugh. Anthony, you wanted to come back, if you can, briefly.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. On that particular issue, it is one of the areas in which Bristol has a responsibility and has a mechanism in place, quite not independent, but certainly alongside government national requirements. I am very concerned, and I've had conversations with people about this, about the discharge of patients from hospital back into care homes, and thereby, particularly if even though they've been tested, they may be asymptomatically or pre-symptomatically tested, that they are at risk of bringing back, at high risk, because they've been in a high risk area, of bringing back problems to a care home, which is itself a high risk institution full of high risk people. And some of the figures that we've seen in the last couple of days have shown that that is a concern. I am very worried about this. I don't see.
Can we let Hugh respond to that?
Okay.
Please, Hugh, if you're happy to.
Certainly, it is, yes, a matter of significant concern. I think, as I noted before, the flattening elongated curve has meant that the care sector is actually now the focal point for COVID-19, especially in the Southwest. And, you know, in the 30 years that I've been involved in health and care services, last week was the first time that social care actually got the prominence in the public eye that it, I think, deserves. So it's very interesting to see how it has become very much focused on care, and particularly care homes. I am confident at this stage that people won't, everybody, obviously due to the new governmental guidance, everybody that leaves hospital will be tested to ensure that they are, to ensure that we do know their COVID-19 status. Because of the sterling work that's gone on amongst health and care workers in the last few weeks, the hospital occupancy levels in Bristol are at an all-time unforeseeable low. They're occupied at around 50% of bed occupancy at this stage. Plus, there is the new Nightingale facility that adds additional bed capacity into the system. So whilst in the longer term, again, as with easements, in the longer term, we won't be able to certainly rule out that people will be discharged to care homes who have still got COVID-19. At this stage, there won't be any need to, because there's sufficient capacity in hospitals and in the new Nightingale facility to ensure that people can be clear of COVID before they are discharged.
Thank you, Hugh. I've got Steve, Claire and Paula indicating. So Steve, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I must say the council officers seem to be doing a great job, so I really would congratulate them on that. I've got a few questions about sort of process within this report. One of the main things it does is it streamlines decision making. So decisions, you know, financial decisions outside the budget up to £2 million can effectively be made by the head of paid service or the Section 151 officer in consultation with the mayor and or the deputy mayor. After that decision has been made, there has to be a report written sort of justifying the urgency, if you like. It's not clear to me where that report comes to and who considers that report. So that's my first question. The second question is for Nancy around procurement. Nancy, are we happy that these sort of streamlined procurement processes are legal proofed, so to speak? So I'm interested in that. But the third thing, and the main one really, is this sort of catastrophic loss of income streams and the impact of that. It seems to me that all the work we've done, you know, in the period leading up to the budget is sort of thrown out the window. I mean, I think it says in the report that we need to remodel the budget, the MTFP, the Treasury Management Policy, and the capital strategy. Well, that's pretty much everything. So going forward, I think we need a scrutiny process that sort of walks next to that process. And I'm not quite sure what that process is. It could be some kind of ongoing task and finish group. I'm not quite sure, but I do think as a committee, we need to think about what that process might be, because there's going to be very important real life prioritising decisions made about how this council spends the money that it's got left in the kitty if it doesn't get this 80 million, or if it doesn't get part of this 80 million. So that's a comment, but I've got two questions. The questions were about where does the report go about the decision making, and are we happy about the procurement?
Mike, are you able to answer the question about the decision making?
Well, I'll give you my understanding, and I'll let Nancy confirm. But if I could just take each of the questions, but then Nancy may want to add. So really, just to, I guess, agree with Councillor Clark about the impact of the loss of income if it isn't made good by government. And I would emphasise again, at the moment, we're focused on trying to ensure that the government understands the scale of the impact on council finances. It's not unique to Bristol. There's quite a wide range of the scale of impact on councils. But in terms of other core cities, the figure that Leeds have quoted is around 100 million. And I think the figure for Birmingham was approaching 200 million. So the scale of this is vast. And I think particularly within the Treasury, within government, they don't understand the extent to which over the last 10 years, local sources of income have become integral to core service delivery. And I think there are those within government who think that these income streams pay for us to do the add-ons and the nice to have. I don't think they understand, as you say, Councillor Clark, that it is woven into the heart of our medium-term financial plan, as indeed we have been encouraged to do by government over the last few years. So at the moment, our focus is on making sure government understand that and hopefully help us solve the problem. But yes, if it isn't solved, it will require major reprofiling of the council's business and a thorough review of the medium-term financial plan. On procurement, effectively, the government has actually issued guidance for authorities that allow us to operate with additional flexibility. So we have to make sure that we operate within that government guidance. We can't do anything we want, but there is clear guidance, and we are making sure that we follow it. And in terms of the report, my assumption is it's a report to Cabinet, but Nancy may want to add something.
Nancy?
Thank you, Chair. No, that's right. There is guidance that's been published by the government in relation to procurement. And I know that both procurement and legal colleagues have reviewed the guidance that we've issued against the guidance that the government have published and are satisfied that that is appropriate. In relation to any reports, those would decisions made, those would only be taken in very exceptional circumstances, and yes, they would be reported to Cabinet as soon as possible thereafter.
In answer to your comments about where we go, Steve, the suggestion that I was going to come up with was that we should reconvene the Budget Task and Finish group, as that has proved to be a very effective way of working and allows finance officers full and open discussion with members who are interested and committed to resolving the way ahead. And I'm wondering, Mike, would it be appropriate if we made that decision today with a view that we've agreed we will do it, and we keep it under review with you and Denise as to the appropriate time for reports to go to that group?
I think that's a very good suggestion, Chair. Happy to support that.
Would members be happy that we reconvene, invite Clive, if he would, to chair that group, as he's done such a good job over the last 2 years, and ask Democratic Services to check that the membership of that could remain the same as last year, and that we move that forward so that it's ready to go again when it's appropriate? Members happy with that? Or Steve, are you happy, first of all?
Well, the only slight fly in that ointment is I'm not sure Clive is up for doing it. I did have a brief chat to him this morning about it, and he's well, I'm just not sure he is. So I agree with the idea. I think we do need a committee. I think we need to have a discussion about who's on it and so on and so forth.
Okay. Members in general happy that we go down that route? If you can just raise a hand if you're in favour. Yeah. Anybody against? Right. Okay. We'll move it forward and have some discussions, and members are happy, we'll report back at the Leeds meeting and then at the next full OSM meeting. Okay, then Claire.
Thanks, Jeff. I just wanted to come back on the issues that relate to people scrutiny and health, just so that members are aware that I'm in discussion with leads of people scrutiny, the party leads, about some of the issues that do need to be covered, and that does include PPE and the effect on care homes, etc. I'm still waiting for some responses on that, but I'm hoping that we should put together a list of issues that we need responses on, and I would hope that in early next week we will get something together on that front. Just wanted to say that actually with the whole remote working thing, it has been a little bit difficult to get responses from everybody, so that we're all on the same page, but wanted to reassure you that as chair of people, I'm on the case, really. Then while I'm on, it would be great if Hugh could confirm that so far no one has gone without PPE in the council, because there was a tweet earlier on in the week from the mayor that said that there wasn't enough, that they'd had a delivery but it wasn't enough, which was a bit vague, really. So, you know, could you confirm that tweet of not enough? Does that mean that we had ordered more, expected more, and we didn't get it all? Or does that even mean that people are going without it? Because doesn't seem to be the message I'm getting from you. Then I've got one issue to come back on with Steve, but Hugh, if you could answer that for me.
I can answer in regard to the stuff in adult social services and under the People Directorate. As I understand it, for the in-house provision of care homes and reablement domiciliary care, and also in the context of social workers and assessment staff who may be on the front line, there hasn't been anybody who hasn't had what they needed. So I can confirm that up to this stage. I think, and I'm relatively new, so you'll have to forgive me, but I think last weekend there was due a national drop of orders that were made under the Local Resilience Forum, and I think they're the drops that the Army bring, but I think that drop was insufficient. I don't think it contained all of the things that it was meant to contain, but regardless, there are other means by which we do get PPE, and providers get PPE as well. The council gets some. I do think that what I said before still stands. I think we do have sufficient, but if we didn't get any more supplies in a short to medium period of time, we would be in trouble. But I think we have got sufficient for the moment, and the mechanisms are in place to keep that coming through.
Molly, did you want to come back?
Just to say, I think the specific issue that the mayor was referring to was, as Hugh said, a anticipated LRF drop that was expected to be of a significant scale and turned out to be actually very minor compared to what we'd been promised. So I think there are some cabinet questions as well relating to this, where there'll be a fuller answer for members.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Mike.
You had one further point, if you could briefly.
Yeah, it was just around Councillor Clark's comments on how much money we're losing as a council. And I just wanted to ask Mike, at what point do we start looking at using reserves, and when are we allowed to use them, in what context? Because obviously this is an unprecedented event. And we have reserves for unprecedented events, but there must be sort of terms and conditions for using those reserves.
Yeah, that's right, Councillor Hiscock. But just to say, we are already actively revising our own treasury management approach to be frank, to protect, the cash balances of the council. Mike Pilcher said a little bit about this on the member briefing earlier this week, but we're actively reviewing all of our reserves to make sure that they're used appropriately and very wisely given the current level of risks. I think we could provide a fuller response on precisely what the restrictions are and what we can and can't do. But this is one of those occasions where, by and large, all of the reserves need to be reviewed and ensured that they're used to keep the council going. To be honest, you may have read some of the media coverage. Some councils around the country literally are likely to be running out of cash in the next few weeks. We're not in that situation, but we're very clear that we need to now look carefully at all of our reserves and the management of the cash of the council very carefully.
Right, thank
Great,
you.
thanks.
Paula.
Well, actually, a lot of my questions have been answered by other people. It's about the loss of income. I suppose the only remaining question is will we be able to see from the next quarterly report where the losses are? I know in the briefing during the week we were told that essentially it's from parking, business rates, and council tax, and that just made me think that it would be really of value for us to see where the losses are from, and obviously also I'm sure you talked to that point about how much pressure we in Bristol would be putting on central government to make up the losses. So I suppose it's just a question of at what point would we be able to understand two things. One is the specifics of the losses, and two, the strategies for pressurising national government to make good.
Can I perhaps just add to that, because my understanding is in the normal course of things that wouldn't become apparent because the collection fund would lose those variations. So we would presumably need, as part of the Q1 monitor, an indication of the shortfall on the council tax and business rate collections.
Well, I was wondering whether the report, instead of it being the usual format, whether it would be possible for it to be amended in such a way that it would make those things clear.
I think, Chair, it's quite right. We effectively need to produce, bespoke reporting in this circumstance. And I think Mike Pilcher on the briefing referred to the fact that we've done some specific modelling of the impact. To be frank, we can't wait to actually see the impact coming through because of the scale of the impact. We need to be doing the modelling now and thinking about how we manage and mitigate that. So Denise Murray and the team are doing that modelling at the moment, and as soon as Denise feels that it's settled to a sufficiently robust position, I'm sure she'd be happy to share it with members I would say in a bespoke form, rather than trying to do it through manipulating the regular financial reporting. If I may, Chair, just to say a little bit about the lobbying that's going on, I think it's fair to say we're using all of the channels available to us. So we're working with all councils through the LGA. We're working with core cities to reflect the particular challenges facing major cities. I don't know, Tim, if you want to say anything more about the work that we've already done around that, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, just to provide a little bit of detail, we have been liaising with government on a number of issues. So not only the financial, but some of the tertiary issues that affect our finances. For example, lobbying around the free school meals school voucher scheme over the Easter holidays, which was successfully changed by government. In terms of the specifics that Mike's referring to, we're working through the Core Cities Treasurers Group, which is developing an urgent paper on the financial cost and burden of the crisis. And that will be delivered to government. We're providing weekly briefings to our own MPs and asking them to feed back to government as well. And they're very pleased to do that for us. The Mayor and senior leadership team in regular conversation with government through established channels, which include South West Councils, the LGA and regular council leader calls with the Secretary of State. And our Finance Director is in direct and very regular discussion with the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government's Local Government Finance Directorate. So as Mike alludes to, really, on all fronts is the short answer to that strategy. We will be looking very closely at the formula for the allocation of the government's second tranche of funding. I think it's important to flag that we haven't had that yet, and we do believe it will be following a different formula to the first tranche of funding, particularly with reference to the pressures that the district councils have been facing. So it may be that we shouldn't be expecting that the next set of funding will necessarily be as high as the 13.5 million first tranche that we had. We will, of course, be writing to the Chancellor and others once we know what the quantum of that funding is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Right, I'm wanting to bring this item to a conclusion, but I've got Celia who hasn't yet spoken. So Celia, over to you.
Well, I think I'm sorry I was late to the start of the meeting, but what I'm thinking of is when this is all over, it would be really useful to have a session, a debrief about what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, and what new ideas have come out that we can take forward, because I know some things, I'm very involved in the community hub, are working really well, and it'd be nice to use those experiences and take that forward. So that is, sort of concluding comment, if you like.
Thank you, Celia. I just wanted to follow on from that. Anthony, I'm not going to come back and take any more comments now, because I've given everyone who wanted a chance to speak once. There were 3 points I wanted to make. The first, which is being talked about in the business community, and I know is being hinted at our members' briefings, is talking about the new normal that's going to be the case when lockdown comes to an end. And I think that follows on from Celia's comments. And so, Mike, I do think there is a role for scrutiny and members to be a catalyst in that discussion, because it is very clear that if we return to what we've done before, when normal comes back again, we will be missing out on learning the lessons that have come through this process. So I think that is very much a question I would ask, is how can we engage with you and your officer team in helping to develop those processes so that we come out of it better. So that was the first point. One point I want to make, which is personal, but which I hope every member of the Commission will share. Mike, in your introductory remarks, you thanked every officer of the Council. You missed one out. And I just wanted to put personal thanks to you for what I think is the most extraordinary leadership and direction that you are giving without any political direction, but with very much care for the community that you and we all serve. And I'm sure if members would just show that they agree with that, and Mike, we would wish you to note that appreciation. If I can follow on from that, however, you did pay tribute to all the officers of the organisation. I have to say, I've watched the briefings, I've heard what's gone on and what staff are doing. I know our staff always raise way beyond what we have any right to expect, but in this case, they've surpassed even the normal standards that they've set. Would members be happy that we ask Mike to convey in any appropriate way he can the appreciation cross-party from members of all four parties of the incredible work that our staff in every department and every service have delivered? Everybody happy with that? Mike, could you please, in an appropriate way, convey that?
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate that, and we'll make sure that that message gets right round the organisation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I'm going to come to a close on that item, and whilst officers who were involved in it are welcome to stay with us, I fully understand that you have more pressing things to do, and I thank you for your time and your contribution. And we move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the clean air zone. There are questions and statements. We have all seen the statements. There is a question from Clive Stevens, which he has also submitted to Cabinet. And we've responded to Clive that Cabinet is the appropriate body to answer that question, but members may wish to raise points arising from his question in our discussions on the clean air zone. We also had a question regarding councillors having had access to modelling results to check on the spillover of the clean air zone, and asking whether members of Osm were satisfied that our concerns had been answered. I propose asking members if we are happy with the answer to that question during the course of our discussion. But I think that's appropriate to discuss as we go through this rather than to discuss it now. So I'm going to ask Mike to introduce, and then I think Adam has a brief presentation before we can then get on to our questions. So Mike, over to you.
Thanks again, Chair, and I've got the brief steer. However, I did want to just recap a little bit because I'm very conscious it's a long time since CAS was before your committee. And a lot has happened since then. I think it would be an understatement to say. So when we submitted our outline business case in early November last year, we expected a government response in a matter of weeks. Of course, a general election intervened, and subsequently there's been a change of key ministers. But despite the delay to us being able to submit our full business case, Adam and the team have made really good progress with the technical work that we needed to do. And as you will have all seen, that's enabled us to move forward the potential compliance date to 2023. So last time we talked to you, that was somewhere between 2025 and 2024. So despite the delays so far, the good news is we've got a potential scheme that would bring compliance forward to 2023. Of course, now we have to consider the impact of COVID, which is very significant to say the least. It's actually very hard to know precisely what impact COVID will have on our ability to move forward because, of course, the pandemic is still unfolding. And for understandable reasons, it's difficult for anyone, including the government, to set out exactly when we'll be able to do what. So at the moment, we're just engaging very closely with government, JACU, but also other parts of government about how best to manage the impact of COVID whilst still delivering the objectives of the clean air zone. So at that point, Chair, I'll hand over to Adam, who's got more of the detail for you.
So I'm just going to very quickly cover what was in the ministerial direction letter. I think you will all have seen this. I won't dwell on it for too long. It reaffirmed the requirement to reach compliance, setting that new target year of 2023, which is based on our latest modelling. Requested some additional modelling and testing work, which I'll cover in the next slide. Reset our full business case deadline to the 18th of September. That essentially reflects the additional information that they've requested, that we can't really start our full business case until we've agreed with them the scheme that we're working on, and they've fully assessed all the additional evidence that they wanted. In order to enable us to keep moving the scheme forward, though, the other thing they did was provide funding for the CAS-C element. So whilst there is some discussion about what the central zone should be, whether they'll be able to deliver the diesel ban element or not, they were in agreement that the CAS-C element would be a requirement of our scheme either way. So they have provided us funding for delivering that element, currently scheduled for the 1st of April 2021. So a quick update on the scheme then. As Mike said, the modelling results have been updated, so the hybrid scheme now has a compliance year of 2023. The medium CAS-D has a compliance year of 2024. As before, both of those schemes are being driven by Marlborough Street, Upper Magdalen Street, by the BRI, and by Baldwin Street. Those are the two worst performing parts of the city. Jackie requested some additional information, as I said in the last slide. It was largely around the diesel ban zone. So as part of the work that we've done in the OBC and to date, we make a number of assumptions about what vehicle and driver behaviour will be when the diesel ban is enacted. So Jackie are very keen to test the sensitivity around those assumptions that have been made. So they've requested a piece of work from us, which we've been carrying out to look at the assumptions that were made and say what sort of level of change is required to have significant impacts on the compliance year. So it's in order to give them more confidence in the decision they're making around the diesel ban zone, and that it will deliver the compliance that we are expecting. So we've been doing that work, and we have submitted that information to them, and we're awaiting their response on that. They have asked, as previously, that we retain the medium CAS-D as our benchmark option to compare against. And what we decided would be worth doing was to look at what we could do with that central zone other than the diesel ban, in case of the diesel ban not being approved. So our feeling has been, having looked at the medium CAS-D, that the economic impacts of that are quite significant, particularly on low-income families. So we wanted to test what a small CAS-D in the central area where the diesel ban is would look like. So we've done some work on that. We've submitted it to JACU, and again, part of the delays that they've asked for further information on that piece of work. What the small CAS-D showed was that while the diesel ban was still the best performing scheme, so got the highest reduction in emissions and got us to compliance quickest, the small CAS-D with the medium CAS-C actually worked better than a medium CAS-D covering the whole area. That may seem a little counterintuitive. The reasoning really is that the areas where we have the most problems around the BRI and in Baldwin Street are in the central area, and a smaller zone that restricts access to that area enables some vehicles to go around the zone. So therefore, rather than paying and then going through that central area, they're able to go through the areas that are further out that don't have the same issues in terms of air pollution. So overall, whilst it's a smaller area, it performs slightly better than the medium CAS-D. So JACU have that information as well, and we feel that a smaller CAS-D has a much smaller impact on lower income families due to the size and the fact that it's more targeting the area where we have actual issues. So that's where we are with the information. We've provided all that to JACU, and we're, as I say, we're awaiting their response to enable us to finalise the FBC work. Looking at the timeline, we've already supplied that data. We're sticking to the FBC submission date of 18th of September. We don't feel at present that the COVID issues are going to prevent us from doing that. You know, we can work offline, etc., or online, sorry. We still have the CAS-C implementation target date of the 1st of April 2021. Prior to COVID, we were confident that we could hit those dates in terms of delivering the scheme. Obviously, with COVID impact, it makes it more difficult. We're awaiting further updates from JACU about what their views are on CAS schemes. So you will note that they've delayed some CAS schemes in other cities, and obviously we've contacted them to discuss our CAS schemes and when it will be implemented. We still have also a target date of full implementation for the whole scheme of the 1st of April. This is going to be more difficult because of the additional information that's been requested for the inner zone. So it is challenging. I would say in terms of the diesel ban, any delays to implementing that would probably be less impactful because it's a cut-off measure. So it's a measure that stops all diesel vehicles entering a zone, as opposed to the CAS-C and the CAS-D elements, which are measures that encourage people to change their vehicle by putting a cost on a trip. So delaying implementation of the diesel ban potentially has less impact than delaying other elements. So we are working with JACU obviously to review what the impacts of COVID-19 will be. To date, we've carried on doing survey work under new risk assessments to ensure that staff doing that work are social distancing appropriately, because we understand the importance of getting this scheme progressed. We will have to make decisions in the next few months about on-site works and how how easy those are to deliver, and that will be very dependent on what the situation is nationally in terms of COVID-19 and the lockdown. So all in all, it's all progressing. We're waiting for some feedback from JACU, but overall, as I say, positive story that the compliance date is coming down. We've now got a piece from Steve Crawshaw. So I don't know if you want to go straight onto that or whether you want to have questions about the CAS work. So Steve is going to cover what's happened to air quality during the lockdown. So Chair, I thought you might want to consider whether you want to do questions now or wait till the end.
I think we'll take Steve's report as well. I think that's going to be easier.
So I'm going to stop sharing and Steve's going to take over sharing. So let's see how this works, hopefully. All right, over to you, Steve.
Thanks. Can everyone see that? No.
Nope.
Sorry. How about that? Sorry, I'm having some problems.
Shall I try? Shall I try?
Yeah, that might be easier, Adam. If you've
let's try that. Okay.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So this slide is showing data from our own Scoop network, which clearly shows the effect of, firstly, the social distancing on starting around the 16th of March and then full lockdown on the evening of the 23rd and lockdown proper on the 24th. So there's a clear reduction in traffic of around 50%. This is for all days and from the average of all of our sites. Okay, next slide, please, Adam. But that reduction is not across all sectors. So you can see that most of those types of journey type have declined, but the one that has increased has been deliveries to residential properties, which is the one showing climbing rather than declining. And that's a trend that we've seen over several years, is the rise of van deliveries with online shopping. Okay, thanks. Next one. So this is a summary of the statistics when we compare the same period in 2019 to the lockdown period to about the 15th of April this year. So we've seen a reduction in NO2, which is our compliance gas, from around of around 45%. NOx, which is much more closely aligned to direct exhaust emissions, of around 57%. We've seen a slight rise in ozone, which is to be expected because as NOx declines, it reduces, it stops reducing the amount of ozone in the atmosphere. And we've seen reductions in particulate matter, both PM10 and PM2.5, but these are not as great as those for the directly emitted traffic pollutants of NOx and NO2. There's quite a significant regional and background component to PM10, which isn't affected by these lockdown measures. Okay, next slide, please. So this is just showing a time variation profile, which looks at the average concentrations across each hour of the day for those two different periods. So 2019 is on the left and 2020 is on the right. So we can see there's been a steep reduction at all of our monitoring sites. Particularly interesting is that the Colston Avenue site is now down at typical levels of all of our other roadside monitoring sites. Okay, next one. So we need to bear in mind, obviously, that air quality is very significantly affected by weather. So we need to take out the effect of the weather in order to really assess whether this is a real effect of lockdown measures or whether it's perhaps due to some kind of atmospheric conditions. So what's happening here is a modeling approach which strips out the effect of the weather using some machine learning techniques from the data And I've grouped the sites into 3 different types. So red is the city centre site, which is Colston Avenue. Green is urban background, and blue is urban traffic. So we can see that for NO2, there has been reductions, particularly at the city centre site, but for other types of site as well. For for NOx, there's been a steep reduction at the city centre site and a gradual reduction for the other 2 types of site. But PM10 is a bit more interesting, because what we saw towards the Easter weekend is a regional episode of PM10. So the regional air movements have caused that increase in PM10 that we see there. Notwithstanding that, it's clear that there has been some reduction in PM10, but as I said earlier, that's not been to the same level as we've seen for nitrogen dioxide and NOx. So final slide, just to say then that we've seen traffic declining. I think everyone would recognise that, and as a result, the traffic pollutants of NO2 and NOx have declined. PM10 has declined less. Ozone has actually increased, and that is an issue that we need to be alive to. So it's not true to say that all air pollution has declined, because ozone is a significant pollutant for health. So we need to be aware of that. And applying some de-weathering techniques to the data shows that the reduction is associated with lockdown measures, certainly for those traffic pollutants. But we can't really draw too many conclusions from this transient phenomenon. The risk is that we return to business as usual, and we've still got this ongoing traffic pollution issue over the longer term, which we are dealing with through the CAS and diesel ban plans. That's it from me. Thanks.
Thank you. Right. I'm just getting back my screen again. I'm not sure, Paula, whether your hand is up from last time or has come up for this time. Right. Okay, so I've got Joe, Stephen, and Anthony. So, Joe, over to you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's sort of interesting, the statistics around how much the traffic has gone down and the resulting pollution. What I'm kind of curious to know about is how we compare to other core cities, because it occurred to me that the reason our traffic has gone down a lot is because we're more heavily dependent on people are more heavily dependent on cars to get to and from work. And I don't know if this is true compared to other core cities, but I just wondered if there was any data that we could compare ourselves to, you know, comparable urban areas.
Who'd like to respond to that?
Yes, I can try again at sharing my screen. I have got a chart which compares the core cities. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So this is a comparison with all of our core cities, and Bristol has actually basically compared with Nottingham some of the biggest reductions in NO2 pollution. But again, we need to be careful about drawing too many conclusions from that, because it really is quite dependent on where the monitoring site is compared to busy roads and the type of road that that monitoring site is nearby. It's clear to see from all of those plots that all of the sites have declined when compared to the 2019 baseline. But I think that if you were to take different time periods, for example, you'd get slightly different results. So I'm just cautioning against reading too much into that chart. But yes, we are doing the analysis and the comparison.
Okay, thank you. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Two questions for Adam. The small CAS D, the problem with that, of course, is because it's small, more people are going to try and drive round it rather than pay the money, and therefore there's going to be more displacement. Has work been done on that? That's my first question. My second question was, you said something I didn't understand, which was about delaying the diesel ban would be less impactful. I didn't understand that point. Thank you.
Adam?
Yeah. So in terms of displacement, all of these schemes, the hybrid, the medium CASD, and the small CASD scheme, they all result in reduced trips overall. So they're all resulting in a reduction in overall traffic trips. And the reason that the small CASD is slightly better is that some trips would go around the zone. That would mainly be via routes like the Spine Road, for example, like the kind of the major routes that would enable you to get around that smaller central zone. I don't have anything to hand that shows what that displacement would be, but I think we could probably get that from our consultants. So I could ask them for a map to show what those traffic levels will be. I would expect that what it will show is that there'll be an overall reduction. There may be slight increases, but because you have an overall reduction in trips, those where there have been diversions to may even still have a slight reduction. But I can ask our consultants to provide a map of that and see if they have that information, if that helps.
If I can just come back on that, I understand there'll be an overall reduction, of course, but it may be that there will be significantly more traffic on certain roads, which could have a real impact on some people, particularly if they're near. I'm thinking of Parsons Street School, which is a kind of obvious one, really, because there's a school there. So I really caution, I'm sure you're thinking this already, but I would really ask that you look carefully at these displacement issues, because they're going to really impact on some people's lives.
Yep. So we will do. I mean, I would expect any traffic displacement to be not as bad as what would be seen with the diesel ban, for example, because it's the same size zone as the diesel ban, but it doesn't actually prevent people going through. And when we looked at the diversions from the diesel ban, whilst there was some diversions, it didn't create significant additional pollution on those routes that were around the zone where traffic was diverting to. But I will certainly take that back to the consultants and ask for an update on that.
Sorry, you just said something there. So you said there's significant extra traffic, but it doesn't create significant extra pollution. Is that what you just said?
Not significant. So there will be some diversionary traffic. So there were some routes that we looked at where traffic that was, for example, avoiding the diesel zone was moving on to. But in terms of the pollution levels, they don't go up hugely. So they weren't approaching anywhere near the 40 milligram level. And that was from the map that we showed previously at the last scrutiny, where we looked at all those points on the models. In terms of the diesel ban delay point, I think it's important to understand the difference between how a diesel ban and a medium CAS-C or a medium CAS-D affects pollution levels. So when you implement a charging zone, people have to weigh up the pros and cons of changing their vehicle. So for some people, it will make financial sense to retain their vehicle for a number of years, keep doing the trips, pay the charge, and then change their vehicle. For other people, it will make more sense for them to change their vehicle sooner. And for some people, it will make more sense for them to change their vehicle straight away. With a ban, it's a cut-off point. So at that point, no diesel vehicles can enter that street. So if we take Upper Magdalen Street and Marlborough Street as an example, with a diesel ban, when that diesel ban comes into play, no diesel cars can go along that road between 3 and 7. So the reduction in pollution from the point of implementing that diesel ban is pretty much a kind of a straight drop, because it's a complete ban. With a medium CAS-D, people are changing their vehicles over time. So if you delayed implementing a medium CAS-D, you delay the onset of that behavior change. So if you implement a CAS-D a year later, people start changing their vehicles a year later. So the impact of the scheme is delayed. And because it's a more of a sloping impact, i.e. that gradually over time people move to cleaner vehicles, delaying a charging zone would have more impact on the compliance year than a ban would, because the compliance year is 2023. So if you implement a diesel ban at some point before that time, it should still have the impact that the modelling shows it having if you implement it in early in the period, so in 2021.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just come out. I still didn't really understand it. I mean, surely if you if you have a ban and you delay implementing it, that has a bigger impact than if you have a slope and you delay implementing it.
So I'm referring specifically to the compliance year. So yes, if you didn't implement it, then no one's taking any change of action during that time you haven't implemented it. But in terms of your compliance year, it wouldn't necessarily have the impact that delaying the start of a charging zone would.
Steve, are you done for now? Okay, Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, as a councillor for one of those outlying areas, as you put it, can you hear me all right? Yes. I'd very much like to endorse what Steve says, because we're going to have surely the worst types of vehicles staying longer in the areas which are not suited to those vehicles traveling. So they're going to be very lumpy journeys. They're not going to be straight through smooth journeys. There are very few traffic lights in those areas, or fewer traffic lights in those areas. There's less control, and I really seriously doubt what you've just said. But I would certainly like to see that information as well. We've been seeing NOx and NO2 levels dropping in the sensors in my ward, Cottam, and they're certainly going to go up. Now, frankly, any level increase, even if it's below, you know, the really bad levels, is bad news for local people. And I don't want that to happen in my ward. And I suspect that what we're proposing to do will make that more likely, not just to my ward, but to all of those wards outlying. So I would like to see a lot more information on this piece and the modelling, and perhaps have a conversation separately about it as well. But my separate question is most of us, of all the faces here, have sat through many meetings and briefings about modelling and all the rest. I'm absolutely astonished that suddenly we should find that our modelling gives a delivery date of slightly more than 50% of what all of our decisions were based on. We got to the stage of having the outline business case, and suddenly we find that we can actually do it 2 years quicker. And I think that may well have affected the choices we made, not just earlier down the line, but quite close up to where we are now. And I just think we're now, I just don't understand how we could have spent all of this money doing all of this modelling and finding that we've actually got it frankly wrong, and at a very late stage, which is now actually going to put all of our decision making into a cocked hat, frankly. That's me.
So at OBC stage, whilst we presented the 2025 date, which was the outputs of the initial modelling, we did also state that the modelling had shown that the expected compliance year would be 2024 as the modelling was evolving. So the modelling, the way the modelling is done for this sort of project, it's an iterative process, and the line is a kind of a curve, and you have to keep modelling closer and closer to the date that you think you're going to get compliant. So that has been the process all the way through, and we did expect the compliance year to come closer. The purpose of the initial modelling is to determine which of the options is most likely to achieve compliance earliest, and then you build on that modelling and you refresh the modelling to get the most accurate picture once you've determined which of your options are the most likely to reach compliance. So that's the process we've been going through, and it is a bit challenging to kind of understand at times, but it's the process that JACU recommend, and that is done in general through all these types of schemes. So we have gradually improved. The accuracy of the modelling and the compliance year has slowly improved as part of that. As I say, we did explain in the ABC documents previously that were submitted to Cabinet that the anticipated compliance year would be 2024. The further modelling work that we've done has shown that to come down to 2023.
You're muted, Anthony.
I can come back on that, if I may. Let me ask a really wacky question. In view of the fact that we are getting closer and closer and closer to the point where we're actually implementing a £100 million scheme in terms of getting a compliance, and that we've got a very strange situation now where the number of vehicle movements is obviously very much reduced and is going to probably stay that way for some considerable time after lockdown. Has anybody considered remodeling all this on the next 10 years to see whether it's actually worthwhile spending £100 million to achieve what could be very little, because the trend will be going that way anyway? That's me finished.
So there's obvious impacts from COVID in terms of reduction of emissions. We will be monitoring those. We don't have any direction from JACU that they want us to approach things differently, but we have written to JACU to say we would like to take into account the changes that are occurring now through COVID and see if there are ways where we can look at what we're doing. So that will be something we'll be considering. I would caution that if, part of the issue here is the process that JACU set up in terms of air quality, that every part of every road has to be below a certain level. And looking at our city, the road outside the BRI is always going to be challenging, whatever happens in terms of traffic volumes. Even if traffic volumes drop, say, only recovered to, say, 80% of their normal levels, that road would still be quite congested, and it's the volume of cars and the congestion that causes the pollution on that point. The difficulty with doing anything about that road is there aren't alternative roads to it. It creates a real challenge for us. We will certainly look at if there are other ways that we can achieve compliance, but currently the view from JACU certainly is that this is the way of doing it, and we are still working towards that process.
Can I just sort of come in and just try and clarify a few things, because I find myself getting confused in that what I read in the report appeared different to what I read in the press coverage of the report, and I'm trying to understand the difference in the proposals. So is a CAS D zone, is that effectively a congestion charging zone?
No. So a CAS D zone is a charge only on polluting vehicles, whereas a congestion charge would charge all vehicles.
Right. So but at this stage there is no specification as to what the definition is that would cause that charge to be made.
No, there is. So the specification for a charge in a CAS D is for cars is Euro 6 diesel and for petrol Euro 4. So anything below Euro 6 diesel in a CAS D would be charged as a private car, and anything below Euro 4 petrol as a private car would be charged in a clean air zone CAS D.
Okay, so then when you were explaining the original proposals, you explained that part of the impact on air quality arose because you were giving people 18 months notice of the diesel ban, and therefore that would change people's purchasing decisions, and therefore the impact would come about gradually, not just when the zone is implemented. Whereas at this stage, people don't know what is going to be implemented and therefore can't change their purchasing decisions because they're not aware. Are we not therefore losing some of the potential benefit?
I think that is a concern, but I'm also aware that a number of people are already making those sorts of decisions. So People are aware that something is going to happen in the city, whether it's a diesel ban or something else. So when they are making decisions about purchasing new vehicles, they're already taking that into account. I think when we have that final clarity as to the exact dates of starting, exactly what the scheme will be, it will be a lot clearer for people, and that will accelerate their decision making. But yes, we do modelling, we make lots of assumptions. Real life is often very hard to replicate exactly. We'll have to see how it plays out, but we certainly have examples of people already in business, for example, already upgrading their vehicles in anticipation of what's going to happen. So First Bus, for example, already updating all their buses and will be compliant by 2021, whatever happens.
So I try to be objective across the whole of Bristol, but there are occasions when I can't help being North Bristol centric in terms of the area I represent. And you told us in the original meeting that the arena was excluded from the calculations because planning permission hadn't been granted. Planning permission has now been granted. Will the impact of the arena be looked at in terms of the main wards in North Bristol, that the traffic volumes travelling to it will go through?
We would have to do an additional piece of work to assess it. So we'll have to take that away and find out what that would require, because obviously we have a fixed team of resource that is looking at the project, and we need to ensure that we're making best use of them to push the project forward. It's something I guess we could look at. I'll have to, as I say, go away and get an understanding of what would be required to do that. We can look at existing roads as is to assess what the potential issues might be. I think I would go back to what part of the point of a clean air zone is, that it cleans up the entire fleet. So even though trips are taking place to the north outside of the zone, the fleet is getting cleaned up by the purpose of the central zone. So I can't give a definite answer on whether we can incorporate that work, but I can certainly ask the question.
So if I just take it on from there, and the reason why I'm asking it is we've had the questioner asking about the overspill. I can't tell my residents that the monitors and the air quality within my ward will not deteriorate as a result of the additional traffic that will be generated, because traffic won't be going through the centre of Bristol in the same way. And I certainly can't tell them that with the impact, which could be significant, of the arena traffic. So I can't answer the questioner's question personally by saying I think I'm satisfied the overspill will not cause a deterioration. Can you answer the questioner's question and give an assurance that it definitely will not cause a deterioration in all the surrounding wards?
So as I said previously, the overall, if we assume, for example, the arena wasn't there, the clean air zone leads to an overall improvement across all areas because of cleaning up the fleet. Even in those areas where you see some increase in traffic, we're still getting reduced levels of pollution because of the whole fleet cleaning up. And that is partly a normal process anyway, in that, as you know, newer cars are cleaner than older cars. So irrespective of clean air zones, that's happening either way. But the clean air zones accelerate that with commercial vehicles and also private vehicles. In terms of the arena, the way that the air pollution is measured in JACU's sense is it's an annual average. So it's about annual average daily traffic flows. Now, the arena is not going to have things happening every day. So if we looked at it in the modelling sense, I think the impacts on local roads would be a lot less than you might expect. But what you might be seeing is peaks of increased pollution from when there are events happening. So it's going to be a slightly more difficult thing to assess, because the way the modelling works, it looks at the overall annual vehicle trips in an area and then tells you what the annual levels of pollution are going to be, which I wouldn't expect to be significantly higher, but there may be some localized impacts, but I can't say for certain.
Okay, I'll defer to others now. Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's not just the arena. That's obviously going to be an important point there. But we also, every time there's a crash on the motorways, everything diverts off and comes down through all the main roads through North Bristol. So if we had a combination of the arena and motorway issues, then it really would make the atmosphere very, very poor there. And also a lot of my residents in particular, probably not so many of Jeff's, but mine, are running very old vehicles. And it is a deprived area, so it's going to be difficult to get them all changed out.
Yeah, I think, if the motorway closures will always have an impact. Again, I would say that in terms of the annual impact, those are relatively few and far between. So in terms of trying to model that impact, it will be quite difficult to do because, the motorway may close a few times each year. But what we're looking at is 365 days, 24 hours of pollution information in effect.
Paula.
Hi, Adam. If I've understood you correctly, what you're saying is that the small CASD gets us to compliance better because it would, if I understand it correctly, there are always those 9 streets which cause a problem. So it would bring us down below 40 in those 9 streets. But the corollary is that in some of the other streets around, the levels would be pushed up a little bit. Do we have any, will we be able to make an assessment of what the changes would be? Excuse me. Can we have the results of that modelling? Because obviously people who have, healthier, cleaner streets now, as a consequence of this, would have streets with less good air. I think it's worth looking at.
Yes, I think that's an important clarification. When I'm referring to the small CASD being better than the medium CASD, it's in terms of driving compliance for those areas that are driving our compliance year. So it's that central area that it works better for. Overall, the areas outside of that, obviously you would not see the same level of benefit that the medium CASD would deliver because it's a smaller area, but it is about driving compliance and doing that in the most kind of efficient way, I suppose. We should be able to provide the modelling. We provided obviously the modelling previously, which showed all the receptors and how they changed. I think that's probably something. So I think that's probably.
Paula, you're on twice.
No.
Joe,
that's better.
My battery is just about to go on this one. So I thought I'd join the other one. But I'd just like to make that point then, but I'd like to ask the question.
You're on twice and we've got an echo.
Sorry.
Paula, you need to mute.
I know, I'm trying to do something here. I'm really sorry. I've left that other meeting. And I'm going to mute myself and stay quiet now. Sorry.
Right.
I think I better just stay quiet.
Does anybody else want to contribute? Claire, do you?
Yeah, I just a really quick question actually is that we're looking at the air quality impact of when we have to when there's an issue on the motorway or somewhere and we have to divert. Have we looked at whether there's going to be any increase in gridlock incidents? Because we all know that you know, a butterfly moves in Temple Way and everything comes to a standstill. Have we looked at the impact of the clean air zone, you know, the diesel ban, of when you redirect traffic off the motorway, and whether we're likely to have more incidents of gridlock? I don't know whether that's been looked at, Adam. That's just an aside, but it's a sort of observation.
I wouldn't say it's been looked at in great detail. I know we looked at what we would do coming down the Portway. That's part of the reason we looked at removing the A4 to A370 movement from the diesel ban zone, so that when we had motorway closures, we could still allow vehicles through. In terms of stuff coming down, say the M32, if there was an issue on the M4 or M5, we haven't looked at what the potential impacts would be. I would expect that we would be diverting traffic down the Spine Road and other routes like that to try and get them to avoid the area. There are options to sort of temporarily remove the zone, but I think they're quite difficult to make sense of, I suppose, for drivers, and it'd be challenging for drivers to understand that. I'd have to defer to the team to know exactly what work has been done in terms of assessing those alternative movements, but there will be signed alternative routes avoiding the diesel ban zone. So when a motorway is closed, that's where the traffic would be diverted to.
Mike?
Thanks, Chair. I feel I need to come to Adam's aid a little bit here, because I think a lot of member questions, which are perfectly understandable, about consequential implications, unintended consequences, etc., are perfectly legitimate concerns. The problem we've been raising right from the start is that the government's very narrow focus on legal compliance has meant that they've created a really tightly defined methodology that Adam and the team have to stay within. And to be frank, it doesn't allow for us giving any great weight to these other considerations. So although you're right, we need to be thinking about them and to think about the mitigations we might need to put in place subsequently, the government-driven methodology just doesn't pay any attention to them, because the government's got a very narrow focus around legal compliance on the specific streets that currently fail to meet the threshold levels. So to be fair to Adam, you know, your questions are perfectly understandable, very legitimate, but the methodology doesn't really give us much scope to take them into account.
Okay, sorry, it just occurred to me that it was something we needed to think about. I wasn't meaning to put Adam on the spot there. So can I just ask members then, in the context of the question we were asked, which said councillors have access to modelling results to check on the spillover effect of the clean air zone on areas outside the zone, has Oldham satisfied itself that the effects are acceptable? And if not, have any changes been made to the clean air zone scheme? Are members happy that there is no overspill? Anthony, I think your comments suggested you weren't happy with that.
I've got a problem. Every time I try and click the microphone, a box comes.
Oh, you've muted again. You're mute again.
Sorry, hello. I've got a problem. Every time I try and press the mic thing, a box comes and sits over it, so I can't see what I can't see the target.
Your space bar should do it.
That takes a certain amount of a level of intelligence, which maybe I lack, Jeff. No, I am not convinced. I've seen some of this information. I think there are many what ifs, as Mike quite rightly refers to, but I don't think this is going to make life any easier for outlying wards. I think we have seen things getting a bit better. I don't see that's going to, I think that will get worse. And of course I'm concerned, because those are the people I represent, but it's also part of a bigger problem around this zone, which many of us are affected by, and it has to be confronted.
Are there any members who feel that we are satisfactorily assured that there's no overspill?
Well, can I just come back in? Just again, it's on that point. I suppose really what I was trying to get to with my question about the 9 streets and compliance. And I completely understand what Mike is saying, you know, that we are legally required to get below 40 everywhere in those 9 streets. But our standpoint, I think, should be that, you know, we make the air as clean as it possibly can be for everybody else. And maybe it sounds naive, but I don't really think that we should just be pushing the dirty air to barely get compliant. I think that, you know, we need to have, especially now that we've had this pandemic, which is exacerbated by poor air. So therefore, I think what we should be doing is setting the bar higher. So definitely, you know, get below 40 on those 9 streets, but get below 40 of those 9 streets and keep air clean everywhere else. So I know the modelling is there, and I know you're getting compliant, but I suppose maybe there's just that generosity of clean air that I'd like more of it, please. And therefore, you know, if we need to put in restrictions to get below 40 in those 9 streets, do it without pushing dirty air into the surrounding streets. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, Paula. So I'm just trying to see if there are any members who actually are saying, yes, they're happy that there's no overspill. Because if there aren't any members saying that, then I think we're certainly developing both an answer to the question and comments to go into Cabinet. So is there anybody who is happy that there is no overspill and impact on wards outside the zone? So the corollary of that is that members are concerned that there may be an impact of overspill, and therefore would it be reasonable for us to make a submission to Cabinet to actually say that and I think taking the point, we fully understand the need for compliance and we see clean air is a requirement for all, but we would actually like to have some further detailed explanations to put our minds at rest that there is not a deterioration in the overspill. Steve?
Yeah, the devil's in the detail, really. And so I can't see how we could be satisfied without having that detail. I mean, if there's going to be lots of extra traffic driving down the Spine Road, fine, I haven't got a problem with that. But if there's lots of extra traffic, you know, driving down a trunk road in my ward, you know, well, I'm not happy with that at all. So how can I possibly say that I'm happy with the question?
Yeah. Okay. Anthony's nodding. I think there's general agreement. And I think Adam, if I can sort of read between the lines of comments, I think members are fully aware of the very difficult balance you're having to travel to have come up with these proposals. So this is not in any sense trying to undermine what you've done, which is a fantastic job. But I think it's recognizing that in the areas we represent and that others represent, there are concerns, and we need to have some further assurances to put our minds at rest. Is that a fair reflection, members, of our view? Does anyone have anything else they want to add on this item as I'm about to close it? Can I just ask whether we want to make any comment to Cabinet in respect of Clive Stevens' statement? Does anybody want to say anything to that? Paula?
Well, I mean, I think Clive came up with an interesting point, and I think it is, I'd like to see it having some airtime. I think it would be interesting to hear people's views on it, because without a doubt, you know, I suppose with COVID, there is definitely seems to be a lot of evidence of people who are, you know, who've got asthmatic and respiratory problems are suffering more. So therefore, I think that we do need to react to that, so that, you know, when all the cars start up again, we could be pushing a situation which was much worse than pre-COVID. So I think it is worth us considering it. I mean, I think his viewpoint has some merit, and it's a good question.
Jeff, if I may, I'm just not sure that this is the right thing to go to Cabinet. When Clive makes a very good point, but when where we've seen other examples of particular types of people at risk, that's being pursued at central government level. I'm not sure we have the resources, or perhaps not even the responsibility, to do that here. I mean, I think we should observe it, we should note it, we should express our concerns, but I don't really think we can call upon Bristol City Council officers to try and make sense of that, but they could certainly refer it up to central government.
Okay, we had a comment from Anthony. Is that the general consensus of the meeting? I think it probably is. Okay, thank you. Both on this and on the COVID-19 item, what I will hope to do is to, in discussion with Lucy and Joe, following notes from this meeting, produce a statement that can go into Cabinet, which I will make sure we circulate to members first, because having had the discussions that we've had, I think we should put something on record formally for the Cabinet meeting. Are members happy with that? But that ultimately it'll be a draft that I hope we can agree on cross-party, but there may have to be an element of balancing the numbers up to get something. But I will try and make sure it's in the usual diplomatic terms that is not going to evoke too much disagreement. Okay, in which case, Steve and Adam, thank you for your time and all your efforts on this. And we'll move on from this item to the last major item on the agenda, which is the Mayor's Forward Plan. Mike, I'm hoping you can stay with us for a few minutes more, but I understand if you need to be elsewhere. Okay, so the Mayor's Forward Plan has been published. The leads have gone through the plan and have done various bits of research on the paperwork. And if I can just ask people to comment accordingly. Claire, your photos disappeared, but your name's still there. Are you able to comment on the workforce for the future and the apprenticeship? You're muted. Oh, they are.
There, am I back?
You're back.
I was trying to look at documents at the same time on the same computer. So the WECA ESF bid, I've had a good conversation with Jane Taylor, who's the lead on skills. And the WECA, so the bid is going in for some money for SMEs in South Bristol. The reason that South Bristol was chosen was because it doesn't have an enterprise zone in its own right, and it has it out of the whole of the city, it has the sort of least business input. You know, when you look at central Bristol, and it's got things like the engine shed, etc. So it was felt that the area being bid for was the most appropriate. She wanted to raise to make sure we all were aware of the issue that this is just a bid to WECA. She is Bristol City Council is competing against other bids that are being submitted to WECA for ESF money. So it's not a done deal, but that supporting SMEs in that area is quite crucial, and the support would be around bringing an extra employee into a business with a view to putting them on an apprenticeship. So it's that sort of support in growing SMEs and giving them advice on how to expand their business. Obviously, that's going to be pretty crucial after we come out of COVID, because a lot of them are trying to just survive. So that's, I think, it's even more important that we get that money. The other issue that came up at Leeds was, had they considered the impact of the clean air zone on SMEs in South Bristol, and they hadn't. But after our questioning, they are now. They're going to have a look at the impact of diverted traffic, etc., and how that will affect them in that area. All in all, I'm really happy with the bid. I think it's really clear. I've sent to Joanna some of the extra statistics around that bid and the apprenticeship bid, so perhaps people can have a look at that later. They only came in this morning. Is that all you need to know, Jeff?
Yeah, I think so. If everyone's happy with that, can I suggest, Claire, that you might let us have 3 or 4 lines on each of those 2 items that can go into our submission to Cabinet, if members are happy that we go down that route?
Jeff.
Yeah.
Do you want me to just quickly comment on the apprenticeships?
Yeah, I think Anthony wants to say.
Okay.
I was just going to make one remark. In the notes of the meeting, the Leeds meeting that we held last week, there was Jeff's opinion was recorded. I just want to reassert my minority thing about the skills things. I think it's entirely appropriate that business builds on the skills it needs to drive forward business. That's what business is good at. That's what business does. WECA, however, should be taking an overview as to that lack of skills or gaps which actually would enable bits to join up better and create a better sub-regional delivery. And that was lost in the notes of last week's Leeds meetings, but I think it's a really important point to make. That's what WECA's there for, I believe, and any submission should be on that basis.
Yeah, sorry, Anthony, I should have been clearer. We'll be looking at improving skills as well. So it is about upskilling people in that area in order to feed in to expanding SMEs. So I think that is covered in that bid. But what you need to be mindful of also is that when you apply for ESF money, you are bidding very specifically around that proposal. It's not WECA's, it's not within their remit or within their purview to change the ESF money. They're trying to get money from a specific scheme. This is not, it's almost aside from what they do. When you apply for European money, you have to be very specific about meeting those criteria. You can be going and doing other things, obviously, and WECA are doing those other things, but on this specific issue, it's trying to get that funding, because if we get that funding now, it will actually last 2 or 3 years and have an impact. So I don't think WECA can be criticised in this instance, actually.
So Jeff, sorry.
Yeah, Paula.
Yeah, sorry, I'm ashamed to say that in these days of lockdown, I do actually have to go and do something else now. So if I could just briefly say a couple of things. One is I've had a good look at the CPO document, which seems very detailed, very thorough, due diligence all done. I haven't managed to see the exempt paper yet because of difficulties with, things this week. So I will have a look at that, hopefully. And then I can come back to you if there's anything that needs to go to Cabinet. I also, I've recommended that the HR committee look at the apprenticeship programme from sort of 2016, 2017, and that a report comes on that to future HR, because I did have some concerns about, missing deadlines and things dragging on. So is it okay if I sign out?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, Paula, can I just say I'm happy to talk to you about that apprenticeships item offline.
Cool, excellent. And apologies for the, didn't realise quite how much battery was going to be used up from having a morning of Zooms. Take care, everybody.
It kept us all alert. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Paula.
So,
right.
Jeff, just quickly come back on the apprenticeships.
Yeah.
The apprenticeship item is very much about gearing up the number of apprenticeships within the council as well as their training, and the skills department is very aware that we are behind on using up our levy, and I was assured that actually there's becoming a much more robust system about recruiting apprentices across the council. One issue is going to be that some apprenticeships are delayed because of COVID. Obviously, people can't start jobs if we're in lockdown. And so there's going to be some discussion with government about extending the possible use of the levy, because it's time related. So we will be trying to make sure that we don't lose any of that money.
Can I just add, and not really for discussion now, but perhaps Mike, if you can take on board that in the past we had a fantastic group of apprentices, but we didn't have the ability to actually retain them once they came to the end of their apprenticeship, because we couldn't integrate them into the system, and we didn't have the budgets to create the jobs for them. So if we could put a comment in that really important that we actually have the ability to retain those staff once we've developed and invested in them, and that should be part of the plan from the very early stages. That to me is actually helping reduce the average age of our workforce and securing continuity for the future. So if we could incorporate something like that in comments, like if members are happy, I think that might be useful.
Yeah, I mean, I got the impression that this is part of a whole look at recruitment framework and career progression through the council as well. So it's sort of one element of that. But yeah, Jeff, I think that needs to be mentioned.
Okay.
Hey, Cheb, happy to take away the comment. And as Claire says, we've been doing quite a bit of thinking about our overall talent management strategy, from the point that we take people into the organisation right through their career development and onwards. So we can take that comment away, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So Claire, if you can let us have notes on both of those. Now, if I just go through the other items that we had, which is the building practice capital budget and the transport capital programme, there didn't look to me as though there was anything contentious on those. Steve, did you look at those, or was that Paula?
I did look at them. There wasn't anything contentious that I could see, and of course they're all up in the air now anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So the only other items I had were firstly that Bristol Energy doesn't appear in the forward plan, but I think, Mike, it's been confirmed that papers will be coming out in May for us to have an OSM meeting before the June Cabinet. I'm guessing that will be substantially a confidential item. but we will have that information for discussion. So say not in the forward plan, but is that right, Mike?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. And one of the reasons it's not in the forward plan is because we will need to do it effectively as soon as we're ready to do it. And that might mean a special cabinet meeting, not necessarily the one that's currently scheduled in June. But we are making provision to support an OSA meeting, obviously in consultation with yourself about timing of that.
But Mike, I know I've raised this with you and we've discussed it, but I don't believe members have formally been told of the change in management at Bristol Energy.
Okay, Chair. Yes, so you're correct. The previous chief executive parted company with Bristol Energy a few weeks ago now. There's an interim manager in place with a particular skill set around the current challenges facing Bristol Energy, a gentleman called Alan Booth, who has been in that post, I think, for probably 3 weeks or so now.
And Mike, the forward plan also has item 11, City Leap update. Can you tell us when it's anticipated that might be brought?
I can't be precise about that, Chair. The City Leap programme is on pause at the moment, given the current crisis situation. Not sensible or practical to be engaging with the market at the current time. As soon as we're clear about what the likely timetable now looks like, we'll let you know.
So there is one issue for members, and Mike, I don't expect you to comment on this because I haven't given you warning of it, but I have a concern that the Mayor's written answers to members' questions about Bristol Energy indicated that the Mayor now says he never thought Bristol Energy was a good idea. And that will come as something as a shock to members who read submissions regarding City Leap, where the Mayor was telling us what a fantastic opportunity Bristol Energy presented and how it was key to the whole thing. Now, my concern is that we've almost got a key decision being made by announcement in answer to members' questions about changing from 100% backing for Bristol Energy as part of City Leap to a hesitant backing for Bristol Energy. And I'm just sharing with members a concern that I think it is an issue that we will need to discuss as a matter of some urgency. And really that's got to come at the same time as any discussion about Bristol Energy itself. Members have any comments? Claire.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I agree, Jeff, actually, because it's complete. The latest comments have been a complete contrast to what we've heard over the last 18 months from the Mayor. You know, he's been very positive and very forceful about Bristol Energy being, you know, there for social value and getting energy poverty, etc. And I was quite astonished at the change in tack and quite worried about that when I heard it. And I think we need to note that. So I'm in full agreement with you, Jeff.
Thank you, Claire. And Anthony is nodding as well. So, okay, thank you, members. I don't have anything else specific from the forward plan. We will meet as leads to review the next forward plan shortly after it's published and identify future work from that. Does anybody else have any other matters they wish to raise before I close the meeting? No? Mike, thank you for your patience and your time. I know you have many significant other pressures, so really do appreciate that you've been with us through the whole of this occasion. Nancy, thank you for your support. Lucy, Joe and Tom, thank you for making this all possible. I'm about to declare the meeting closed, but can I thank you all for taking part in this process and wish you all well. Take care, look after yourselves and your families. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed.
Thank you.
Bye.